Yeah, I was muted. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a nice Thursday afternoon on Inspire SA. My host is Narcissus Mbuyu, and I would like to welcome you once again. Today, we'll be continuing with our part two series of Introduction to Data and the Cloud, where last week, Koketso, our speaker for today, took us through what is cloud and what is data and the difference between the two and how we can access them basically. So now we're gonna be continuing with this series throughout the couple of weeks, and this week is we are doing a part two. So without wasting any more time, I would like to invite him onto the show. Welcome, Koketso.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. How you guys doing? How you doing?
Everyone's okay. Everyone's okay. I'm also okay. And you?
Perfectly well, perfectly well. It's a nice, cool, coldish Thursday afternoon in South Africa. So yeah,
Mm, it's the winter time, but what
yeah,
better
we're
way to
approaching
entertain
winter.
the
Yeah,
winter time with some introduction to data in the cloud?
yeah. I mean, it's always a perfect day to learn about tech in general.
Yeah.
All
Over
right.
to you.
All right, thank you very much. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world joining us. I go by the name of Koketso Mutse Otata, hailing all the way from Johannesburg, South Africa. And if you're the first time joining us, welcome once again. It's not too late to join the series. Last week, obviously, we spoke about all things introductory part one of data and cloud. But if it's still your first time again, you still have a lot to learn. There's still a lot of information that I'm willing to share with you guys. A lot of really cool information that you guys are going to learn. So, as you guys might not know, it's a tech talk. So, just take out your pens, take out your pads. It's going to be very insightful. Nothing too technical, but we're here to learn and we're here to make an impact. Without further ado, let me jump straight into the presentation. Am I audible before I begin?
Yes, you are very audible.
All right, awesome. And just let me know if you guys can see my screen.
It's loading. Awesome. Yeah.
All right. Are we ready?
Ready than you are.
All right, cool stuff. So, yeah, once again, welcome everyone. So today we are doing an introduction to part two. If you missed part one, it's definitely within, the videos within the channel. And without further ado, let me jump straight into it. So let's just quickly do a recap in terms of what did we cover last week, right? So last week we spoke about all things data and all things cloud, right? So I spoke about what exactly is data, and I spoke about the different kinds of data. So remember, I spoke about quantitative and all those kind of other form of data. Then obviously we spoke about the difference between what data versus information. And we spoke about how data, is raw and how information is cleansed and understood and actually has a meaning. So we know that information actually is data plus meaning, right? And that's the formula of what information is all about. We then covered what exactly is cloud. We've looked at the definition, and then we also looked at why is cloud so important, right? And then we also looked at the difference and the benefits of what data and cloud engineering and cloud is all about, right? So we spoke about its security. We spoke about the ability of that you are minimizing a lot of upfront costs. We spoke about it's always really available. We spoke about the unlimited amount of storing capacity power. Then we also looked at companies that actually use data and cloud together. So we actually analyze how Netflix actually predetermines the things that you like, right? So we spoke about data customization for your own personal preference and so forth. And then we also covered a brief introduction of how you can actually get started into data and cloud, right? So today we're gonna just obviously talk about a little bit more interesting things you like. So we'll get to find, we spoke about all of these theoretical things about data and cloud. And after all of this information, what then can I do? Like, what's the purpose of me? And obviously we're gonna dive much more deeper into this week. We're gonna be actually just talking about the careers and that obviously that are offered in cloud and in data, as well as the industries that look into that. I'm also gonna actually show you job opportunities that are actually available right now onto the market, and we're actually going to be looking at salaries as well, right? So I know we're all about the big monies, so I'm definitely going to be also showing you the current stats about each role within the fields, all right? So without further ado, let me just quickly do an introduction. As I said, my name is Koketso Mototata, and these are just some of my credentials. So I am a Microsoft Student Ambassador. I'm an ambassador for Binance. I'm an ambassador for IBM, AWS, and all in all, I'm just a tech person that just loves sharing my knowledge, that loves contributing, that loves collaborating with other tech like-minded people. And obviously all of my details are also there. Please do follow me on Twitter, on all my socials. I do also have a tech blog, so guys, please do make sure that you go and check out my latest articles that I actually focus quite a lot on data and cloud as well. And yeah, all in all, I'm a Pythonista fanatic. I'm also really, really big on React and so forth. But this is not all. This is not about me. It is not about me at all. Today, obviously, it's all about what we have to know about data. So let's jump into the first one and let's talk about the kind of careers that you can actually find or get in data, right? So we're going to be looking at the top four, and guys, there's a plethora of other industries, but obviously I can't go over like 20,000 industry job titles, but I just chose the ones that are really making an impact and the ones that actually the popular ones within each scope, right? So I looked at the top four, and right now the top four is a data scientist, a data engineer, and a data analyst. And finally, we have something called business intelligence. So in business intelligence, actually, you can have a business intelligence developer, a business intelligence engineer, a business intelligence scientist, and an analyst, and so forth. So the term business intelligence can also be broken down into its also subcomponents, which can be the scientist, developer, engineer, and analyst. But for now, these are the top four industries within the data space. And obviously, now we're going to just obviously dive much more deeper into each one, right? So, first and foremost, you're asking yourself, okay, so what is a data scientist, right? So, this one is actually considered to be one of the most challenging career paths within the data space, right? So, a data scientist basically analytical experts, right? So what these scientists actually do is they actually help businesses to make or to come up with predictions in terms of how to make smarter decisions, right? So with data science, you have to have some sort of programming skills. You have to have some statistical skills. You have to have data algorithms and data structures in place, right? So because these people they deal with a lot of data, and they actually help formulate or come with these algorithms that actually help these businesses to actually make much more financial and business decisions, right? So data scientist is one of the hottest job careers right now within the tech space. And we are also seeing quite a very large booming, and obviously from next week we're actually going to be looking we'll be diving much more deeper in terms of the stats and the numbers in terms of popularity with demographics, gender that are actually entering in each of these job um, jobs actually in the different spectrum. So to sum it up is that a data scientist basically is all about is that uses analytics, and they basically use both technology and social sciences to find trends and manage data, right? So moving on to a data engineer. So data scientists and data engineers actually work hand in hand, right? Because A data engineer basically works with a variety of settings to build systems that collect, manage, and convert raw data into usable information. So remember, guys, last week we spoke about data and information. So what a data scientist basically does is that they go out and actually find these datas, right? So for instance, if I am running a social media entity, right, well, company, and I'm trying to generate data for my users, so what I will then do is okay, well, then first and foremost find a data engineer that is actually going to create pipelines. So we call them pipelines, where they will then obviously try to collect data from all of these various sources. So you can find sources on other social media platforms. You can find information through people's cell phone devices, or you can find them, when someone subscribes. So there's a plethora of ways for actually gathering data for, the specific needs that you want. So a data engineer basically is responsible for actually creating all of that. And they basically have to collect all of that data. And then they're also responsible for cleaning and making the data much more usable for data scientists as well as data and analysts, right? So they basically do the heavy lifting, right? So they're the ones actually collecting all of this type of data. And when I mean data, remember, guys, data can be in all forms, shapes, and sizes, right? It can be files, it can be MP3s, it can be text files, it can be CSV files. So you can understand that the amount of data that a data engineer needs to collect, convert, and then place it in a something we call a data warehouse, where a data scientist and data analyst can actually access. But the ultimate goal is just to make sure that the data is accessible to the organization, so that it uses its to evaluate and optimize its performance. Remember, so at the end of the day, they are responsible for making sure that the data is relevant, it's clean, it's up to date, that the company can actually use to make future predictions, right? Then we go into a data analyst, right? So a data analyst basically, so analysis basically, it is the process of inspecting, cleaning, transforming, and modeling data with the goal of discovering useful information. So what that actually means is that the data analyst then looks at the data that the data engineer has then formulated and cleaned, and be like, okay, so data analysts are actually responsible for converting all of that information into much more relatable, and so when we say data modeling, it also includes data visualization. So data visualization means, taking that information and actually plotting and placing it into like things like graphs, bar charts, so that obviously stakeholders or other departments can actually, read this information. The kind of data that a data engineer cannot necessarily be the same as a stakeholder or an investor that will actually understand the kind of information and so forth. And obviously, a data analyst needs to also analyze and inspect all of this data. So, they have to actually interpret to actually tell a story. So, data analysts basically are responsible for telling a story from the data. That are we making good business choices? Are we moving in the right direction? Is the new features that we are trying to do, is it working for the company? So these are the people that actually are trying to bring the information or the data much that has a much more meaning with using visualization tools, right? So that's where another thing that a business analyst also comes in, right? So basically, business analyst, and so as you can see, a data engineer and a data scientist work hand in hand, and then you get a data analyst and business intelligence analyst also working hand in hand together. But all in all, guys, it all actually works in one whole bigger picture, because as you can see, they all actually rely on each other, right? So a data scientist actually relies on the data engineer, and the data and analyst relies on the data engineer for the appropriate amount of data, right? So also, a data analyst also relies on the data scientist, because the data scientist makes predictions and comes up with formulas to be like, okay, well, to make future predictions using machine learning. So basically, what a BI does is exactly the same as I explained with a data analyst. Is that the person will also come and uses business analytics. They will use data mining, data visualizations, or tools just to actually represent the data to be, to be visually appealing and to make better data driven decisions, right? So when we say data driven decisions, so businesses like Amazon is a very big company that is data driven, right? Because they need data for them to survive, so they always customizing their data, they're always upgrading their data methods, and so forth and so forth. So as you can see, all four of these pillars are one of the crucial roles when it comes to data in terms of the career paths, right? So now let's look at cloud, right? So now let's look at also the another top four industries, careers within cloud, right? So we have a cloud engineer, we have a cloud architect, we have a cloud security engineer, and then we have a cloud consultant. All in all, they are also intertwined in intellect and also very, very have a high demand in terms of um, skills required in these industries. So let's dive deeper and let's look at each one, right? So what is a cloud engineer, right? So as the word says, a cloud engineer is basically an IT professional that builds and maintains a cloud infrastructure. So what that actually means is it's not really far away from what a cloud architect does, but mainly what a cloud engineer does is it's just in more specific roles, right? So they may be high because they have to design cloud solutions for a certain organization, or they also deal with a lot of code repositories, so coding of the cloud and also administrations. And what this actually essentially means is it's the person that actually builds what. So you will see what a cloud architect does and what a cloud engineer does, that a cloud engineer actually makes it happen, right? So think about it in terms of building a house, right? So an architect necessarily doesn't is not the one that actually comes with the bricks, comes with the cement and the window and the door, right? An architect actually builds the foundation or the structure of the house, which is the blueprint, right? And then what an engineer does, an engineer then is the person that actually builds the system on top of that, right? So moving on to that, that's what a cloud architect is, right? It specializes is someone who actually has the skills and the knowledge of navigating complex cloud environments, right? And usually leads teams, because a cloud architect actually, you must understand that without an architect, right, in good programming practices, you need to have some sort of a blueprint or follow some sort of plan, right? And a cloud architect actually helps us in that sense, right? In terms of customization of a certain organization, right? So a cloud architect that works for Netflix is totally has a different blueprint for a cloud architect that works for Airbnb, right? And it's totally different for a cloud engineer that actually works with a company maybe that specializes in medicine or maybe in robotics. So it's very crucial to have a cloud architect in your organization because they are responsible for the blueprint. And then what a cloud engineer does is the person that comes and then obviously builds and puts all of these required technologies together, right? So cloud engineer and cloud architect actually work hand in hand. Then obviously, once all of that's said and done, a cloud security engineer is one of the most important fields out there, because obviously we all know that because we're working with cloud and data is quite sensitive, right? So you don't want the data to be actually um, being access to everybody. So to make sure that obviously the data is actually available to certain people at certain times, we need to make sure that our security measures are also in place. And that's what a cloud security engineer comes and does. So a cloud engineer basically identifies threats to the cloud systems, develops new features, meets security needs and upgrades, maintains and builds all of these safe mechanisms to make sure that the cloud as well as the data infrastructure is not actually threatened by outside forces, right? So things like hacking, we have something called DDoS attacks, or we have things like malicious attacks, we have ransomware. So we have all sorts of these malicious and harmful threats that actually from the outside, because people online tend to take advantage of people that don't have, you know, either good data security measures, or just don't have good security knowledge, right? So people will then come and take advantage of that and actually try to manipulate or steal or erase or corrupt the data and the cloud infrastructure. So you need to make sure that your security is also in place. Now, because a lot of companies are moving or migrating to the cloud, another profitable industry or career path is also becoming a cloud consultant, right? So, a cloud consultant basically, it helps companies to identify and act on these cloud needs, right? So they will come in and, let's say, a company, I own a fish and chips restaurant, and I'm like, well, I am my business is growing, but I obviously have heard of this new cloud thing that everyone's talking about, and I want to migrate and take advantage and leverage of cloud technology. So what a cloud consultant does is basically it's like an advisory person that actually helps these companies to migrate onto the cloud. So a cloud consultant can also be a cloud engineer, can also be a cloud architect, but obviously as a consultant, meaning that you don't actually work for one specific company, but you actually work with a number of companies, right? So you actually making your money working with different, usually with smaller companies, not so much of Fortune 500 companies, but usually smaller companies that are trying to migrate and actually get themselves onto the cloud, right? So essentially, this is also another great way of actually making money because many companies want to take advantage and the benefits of the cloud, right? And we obviously touched a lot on the benefits and the advantages of using cloud and data last week, right? So this is one obviously is the one that a lot of people are going to be like, all right, so I know about cloud, I know about data, we know about the benefits. We've actually spoken about the different kinds. We've went deep into the theory, and now we even spoke about the different kinds of industries. But now you're probably asking like, show me the money. I want to actually see the rands, that the dollars and cents, in terms of, is this really a lucrative, is it really worth it to actually get into the whole data space. So I'm just going to be showing you, and guys, these are literally averages, amounts, right? So do take into consideration that some salaries are going to be higher than others, some salaries are going to be lower than others, all depending on your the number of experience that you have, and number two, for the kind of company that you work for, right? So these are purely used on average basis, that obviously the data that I could collect, but these numbers can definitely vary. And when I mean vary, is that it can only move up, not down, right? So slight chances, there are many positions where the salaries are under these numbers, but a lot of the times they could be way and above. All right. So let's look at some of these salaries, right? So a data scientist, as I said, is one of the most complex and the most highest paying jobs actually right now. So in 2020, data scientist was actually named or claimed as the sexiest or the coolest job to have right now. So it surpassed things like becoming a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or so it's literally considered as the coolest and the sexiest job since 2020, right? And obviously, as you guys can see, that these are the kind of amounts of money, and so this is yearly, right? So per year. So you guys obviously can do the math and actually see what um kind of monies that they make, and you guys can see these are quite top um figures, to be quite honest. And like I said, it even goes much higher, especially if you're then working for an overseas company, or a UK company, or a company from Europe. But it also plays in terms of your experience, right? So imagine you have 3 years to 5 years experience as a data engineer or a data analyst. Obviously, then it's definitely going to represent in terms of the kind of salary that you will be getting. right? And these are quite very lucrative industries. The demand is extremely high. These are still new future jobs. These are still considered as future jobs where, in the year 2025, the year 30, these industries and these jobs are still going to be needed and relevant. I mean, just looking at a simple web developer, there is so many web dev jobs out there. It's just that obviously the technologies and the frameworks keep changing, but the type of work we always will always need web developers out there. So as much as we consume data and as much as we produce data, there will always be a need for us to actually have all of these kind of industries, right? So now let's jump into the cloud. So guys, when I look at it personally, I've tend to see that there is more.
Koketso,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. We got a question in the chat. So we got a question from Satabile in Glovu. She's asking, are all these roles coding positions?
Well, you have to actually know some sort of coding abilities, right? So obviously, with data science, it's much more coding intense versus a BI developer. But all in all, you do have to have some sort of coding experience or have some coding knowledge, because obviously you will need to interpret the data, right, to make sure that people actually understand. Remember, you are actually speaking to stakeholders, you're speaking to investors, you're speaking to managers that actually don't understand what all of this data is. So essentially, I would say yes, but it really depends in terms of the depth of how much coding experience or coding knowledge you would need, depending on the kind of roles. But when you look at Microsoft, they have like things like low code or no code platforms where you literally don't have to physically know how to code, but having a good understanding is always will always put you in a better position. All right,
Thank you for that.
awesome. So carrying on, now let's look at the careers in the cloud space, right? So we're going to be looking obviously at cloud engineers, cloud architects, security, and consulting. So as I said, when I looked at my research, the cloud job related jobs are slightly above more rewarding than the data space, right? Reason being is that I think because with cloud, there's a bit more technicalities involved, right? So when we're just looking at obviously the ranges, is that when you compare the salaries of data scientists and data engineers, the salaries of the cloud tend to shift a bit more um, with higher pay, right? And there's a reason. There's a plethora of reasons why cloud is obviously much more rewarding than data. Although yes, data is heavily dependent on the cloud, because obviously we don't want to make sure that we leak sensitive data to other people. But as I said, this is just a rough amount of figures that actually are being offered in the South African market right now. So now let's look at the current job opportunities, right? So right now, you obviously are quite interested, and you can see that it's quite lucrative. But guys, where so my resources is that I'm basing my thesis on LinkedIn, right? And this is like current opportunities right now, and I'm going to be looking at worldwide. So when we look at data, right, and if you just simply type data and you look at the current job markets right now worldwide, if you look at business intelligence, I mean, there's more than 500,000 jobs out there just as a BI developer or BI analyst and so forth. Looking at data analytics, I mean, there's more than 400,000 jobs available right now. When you look at data scientists, there's almost 300,000 when you look at data engineers. So as you guys can see that the number of demand right now is insanely crazy, right? And the fact that these are future jobs, you are definitely putting yourself in a better position in terms of getting to know the technologies now, or familiarizing yourself with the technologies right now, because in 10, 15 years from now, you still want to be able to be, headhunted, or still have a position where, you know jobs are now, or the current position that you're in, that job is actually being redundant or actually gets washed out. Right now we're seeing a lot of traditional jobs, getting substituted by, there is robotics. And obviously we are trying to upskill people to be more digitally aware, more digital literate. So I would honestly definitely pick one of these. Obviously you will have to just be honest with yourself and see what kind of strengths that you feel that you would go into. So I personally have done data engineering as well as data science. And yeah, the opportunities are endless, 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 endless. You will always be headhunted by people asking if you're on the job market, if you're looking for new opportunities, because as you guys can see, the demand is extremely high, and currently we don't have the amount of people that can fill all of these positions. And these positions obviously vary from entry level, mid, seniority, management, even positions, right? So um, the spaces in between are extremely, extremely, extremely valuable. They're volatile, and the demand. I think the demand can only increase because, as I said, the more data that we consume is the more data that we produce, and obviously these data-driven companies need the data to actually survive. So I think these numbers are still gonna shoot even much higher. I mean, we're looking at almost 500,000 jobs currently that are available in each sector. All right. So in total, when I'm looking at this, is that we're also looking at close to like 1 million jobs just purely in the data space. That's insane. That's really, really insane. That there's like currently right now worldwide, there's a total of more than more than 1 million data jobs currently. All right. So let's then take look at the current opportunities in the cloud space. Right. So in the cloud space, it's just also just as much as much of a demand as well as data, because more companies are being introduced to upgrades. They want to obviously migrate. They want to shift into the data, the cloud space. So obviously these numbers are still going to be growing even much more, even much more, even much more. So I personally would give you that advice that do take time to really invest in terms of upskilling your knowledge in terms of any one of these fields. It could be a cloud engineer, it could be a solution architect. And when you look at the leading cloud providers, which is AWS and Azure, they actually do offer, some of them actually offer free exams. If you join them in terms of the certain programs, they actually offer free exams. They offer free training as well, which is extremely, extremely helpful. I really do encourage you guys to actually go into the space and so forth. So without further ado, I think I can just definitely adjourn and say thank you for the presentation. If there's actually any more questions that anyone would actually have, we can shoot right away.
I was muted again. As of now, there are no questions in the chat, but I'd just like to send a shout out to Sabatili. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, for joining in and participating along the session. A shout out to you. So on my side, I have a few questions. I really never realized how much job opportunities there are in terms of the data and the cloud. So now, my question that I want to ask is, how long will it take for me to be upskilled and get started to stand a chance of getting into one of these jobs, and what are the probability of me getting accepted into one of these jobs?
All right, so that's a very interesting question. That's like saying, how long is it gonna take for me to prepare for a marathon? For one person, it can take a month. For some people,
Mm,
it can take 3 weeks, 3 months. But it all really depends on the time. Obviously, time is a very big attribute and a factor in the sense that you need to really invest the time, because you must understand this is new technology, right? And there's quite a lot to learn, to be quite honest, especially when you're entering the space. So there's quite a broad number of technology that you probably have to learn first before actually diving deep into specializing into something much more concrete. And actually, next week we'll be actually talking in terms of the certifications that actually Microsoft actually offers, and how you can actually start thinking about taking your certifications, because the way technology has moved so fast, not to say that I'm not encouraging people to obviously go and still get their traditional qualifications, your Bachelor of Sciences, your diplomas, and so forth. But you definitely need to upscale from that, because traditional methods of how universities and colleges teach us really don't keep up as much as the technology that we're using today. I mean, when you look at post pre 2020, we were all living live in terms of face to face. But now, post 2020, this is where everything now is now online, migrated online. So you can see the huge jump of, we had to make sure the technologies, the platforms have obviously increased. So I mean, I personally, I think my first certification, it took me, I think, a week and a half. But that was just because of, first and foremost, I mean, I do have previous knowledge of, all of these technologies. So as a beginner, I would definitely say maybe just give yourself a good 2 weeks just to really learn and focus in terms of getting to know which um, certification you want to get, and then maybe give it another 2 weeks in terms of really studying and getting into it. But it all really depends on your experience, your expertise, your knowledge, and how quickly you can actually. And I mean, some people really put pressure on themselves. I know some people that they say, okay, I'm gonna do this in a week, and they book the exam, and they like, whether I pass or not, I'm still gonna write the exam. So it really goes with individual progress. Now, landing your first job, however, that one might take a bit of time, because you must understand that companies, when they start hiring you, they're actually investing their time, their resources, and they money on you, right? So they need to make sure that they're actually hiring the right candidate for the job. So you will go through things like, first round interviews. You'll go for a second round interview where you'll probably have some test, or I don't know, a coding problem, or maybe talk to one of the managers there, or one of the tech leads, or whatever. Then you'll probably have a final interview where you're actually now talking with a stakeholder, or the CEO, or the CTO, and then maybe a finance, and then then the offer is then being presented. So it really does depend in terms of the hiring process. I know, especially with the FAANG companies, like your Microsofts and your Amazons, their hiring process actually is much longer than that. I think they've got like 5 rounds of interviewing processes in that sense. So it really depends on what kind of company you are trying to go for. And I personally feel that if you're going to apply for a job, at least look at the specs first, and look at what do they actually need and require. So if you have a desired, um, you know, you have a desire to work for a bank, right, or an investment company, look in terms of the job specs. Look at, what are the skills are required for me to learn to actually get into that
that
kind of job.
specific field.
Yeah.
I see. Well, that's quite enlightening, I have to say. We have another question from Sabatile. Now she's asking, she's thanking us for the session first. So she's saying she's completing her BCom in information system this month, and she wants to take the cloud route. Can you please advise where should I start looking, and the goal is to get a solutions architect.
All right. So, first and foremost, congratulations, well done, and all the best for actually, completing your studies. I personally would suggest is that, Amazon and AWS, Amazon and Azure right now are actually one of the leading cloud providers. So I know in AWS specifically there is a a cloud solution architect, um, and I think in in Azure, I think it might be going but with a different name. But
Yeah,
obviously, yeah, it's definitely gone with a different name. I'll just have to double check. But first things first is that start with the pure basics, right? So AWS has a cloud practitioner certification, and Azure has the fundamentals, the AZ 900 fundamentals. A certification. So you will see within the next 2 weeks, I'll actually be giving you really good tips in terms of how I passed mine, and how you can also pass yours and actually, complete the first phase. So usually the first certification is just an introductory, it's a foundational phase. What you then have to do, obviously, is now you want to obviously land into the more associate levels, right? So that's where the solution architect would actually be, where you're actually going to need a bit more deeper knowledge in terms of that space. So for myself personally, I am more of the developer associate. So my path is definitely different from the solution architect, right? So you will have to obviously then go down that journey, but trust and believe that once you get that certification, um, not to say it's going to 100% guarantee you the job, but it's literally putting you like neck, head and shoulders above the rest. Because obviously, as I said, interview processes are different per company per company. Some I know some people that have, just because they have that certification, what the hiring manager will then do is organize or schedule an interview, maybe with another hiring manager, and then maybe with one of your managers or your technical managers, and you guys just have a chat. They'll probably grill you in terms of questions. So especially with solution architects, is that because you'll be dealing a lot of clients, or you'll be dealing with a lot of client related issues, so they'll probably ask you a plethora of questions in terms of how would you solve this, how would you advise this, and so forth and so forth. Versus as a developer, they would obviously test in terms of, okay, so here's a solution, here's a problem, can you come up with an algorithm, can you come up with a data structure or some folio or some sort of more technical solution in terms of that. So it really, as you guys can see, the parts are really different, but it's all tailored in terms of what you actually want to get out of it.
I see. Thank you for that. I hope you answered Sabatile. I just want to also add on before we conclude today's session. So, as Koketso mentioned, there are various ways to get these jobs. There are certain tools that you can use to get these jobs. And over here on this channel, Inspires A, we focus on the Microsoft side of things. So we expose you to all that Microsoft has to offer. And one of the tools that Koketso was talking about is Power BI, or BI Analyst Business Intelligence. And we do have a tool that deals with business intelligence called Power BI, and we talk about it on Power Thursdays with the ninjas as well. So just stay tuned, follow us, what we do on this channel and everything, and we'll give you all the tools, the exposure that you need to know, so you can be up to date with what's happening in the tech world, and what's up to date, or what the standard things in the tech world right now, in the tech market. So yeah, be sure to follow us on our channel, be sure to follow us on our social media, and most importantly, please tell everyone about this channel, and be sure to tag along and follow. Thank you again for attending this session. Would you like to add anything else before we go, Koketso?
No, I always wanna, encourage and wish people luck in terms of their whole cloud and data journeys. Um, really take it seriously, guys. It can really, really make an impact on, your career path, and so forth. So on my side, really, really just take it seriously. Take more time to learn it. study it, but most importantly, just enjoy it. Just try to find some value and so forth, all about it. And yeah, that's all from my side.
Sure. From us at Inspire saying, and from us from Inspire Say till next time. See you again.
Take care, guys.